Now, without any further delay, let's begin today's event. Once again, Machine Learning and Data Discovery. You can't analyze what you can't find. Sponsored by Io-Tahoe and hosted by Information Management. I would like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Lenny Liebman. Lenny, the floor is now yours.
Thanks so much, Christina. I want to welcome everybody to today's session 2 on machine learning and data discovery. I'm already looking at the attendee list, and you may think you're sitting alone there attending this presentation, but you've got a tremendous group of peers listening along with you from a real diverse range of industries. We've got consultants, we've got people from finance, from consumer products, from public sector all joining us. So appreciate that you're doing that. And I think today's topic is of particular interest because, you know, machine learning, AI, NLP, these are all hot topics. And from a technical perspective, there's certainly a lot of learning that we all need to do in terms of, you know, specific methods and algorithms. But all of us who are actually practicing this discipline within the context of organizations that have actual business needles that they're trying to move for specific KPIs, whether it has to do with customer experience or supply chain efficiency or pricing, we know that there's more to it than just the ML methods, but there's in fact the need to feed into our data science units real data that has the right meaning and the right taxonomy, et cetera. So putting machine learning in the context of organizations that have data of various origins, quality, other attributes is really important for us to succeed. And I really don't know how I do it week after week, but I've done a great job of providing you with 2 awesome speakers today. So let me introduce them. First up today is going to be Dr. Beverly Wright, who's Chief Analytics Officer with Aspirant. She's also an associate professor at Georgia Institute of Technology. So she's a sought-after speaker, thought leader. In her current position, she's leading an analytics and insight practice for a management consulting firm that has Fortune 100 clients. Again, she's also a professor at Georgia Institute of Technology Scheller College of Business. She's held plenty of positions in finance with SunTrust Bank, with Southern Company, AGL Resources. She's also taught at several other schools. So she's got her credentials. She may tell you more about herself, but she's going to give us an awesome keynote to start off to put us in context. And then to sort of complement Dr. Wright's sort of management consulting firm perspective, we've got somebody who's in the trenches, Peggy Tsai, who's VP of Analytics and Data at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. So she's responsible in that position for managing the adoption of various data governance standards and processes in order to sort of feed the analytics process. She's got more than 15 years of experience in data management and stewardship and government. She's also worked at AIG. She's been involved with anti-money laundering, Solvency II, and GDPR. So again, a real wealth of in-the-trenches experience. So I think you've got a combination of voices here today that are going to be very useful. So I want to just reiterate what Christine said at the beginning, which is take advantage of the interactive function of the platform to ask questions. Please do not wait until our speakers are done, and we've actually started the Q&A session to submit your question. Ask questions early and often. If at any time either Beverly or Peggy say something that you need them to elaborate on, if they make an assertion that you'd like to challenge, whatever it is, if there's a topic that neither of them cover and you'd like to see covered, just go ahead and submit your question as soon as you can so we can get it in the queue, because we're looking forward to a nice interactive discussion after these 2 presentations. And also, in that same spirit, what I'd like to do before we first hear from Dr. Wright is to take a little poll. So you should see on your screen right now a poll that is asking you what some of your top concerns today are. So you can pick more than one, but please don't pick them all, because that's the same thing as picking nothing. But if you want to pick 2 or 3, this is kind of how I've organized it. And again, you can just check any of these that apply to you, and then make sure you click that submit button at the bottom of the frame. Otherwise, you won't get calculated into our poll. But sort of is your main concern that you want to ensure the accuracy of the analytic results you get from machine learning and other methods? Is it that you need to make sure that your results and the information that you provide for decision makers are actually relevant to the business in terms of, again, the needles that they're actually trying to move. Is one of your concerns that you need to take time and cost out of your data science processes, especially given the fact that, data scientists are a resource that's pretty hard to come by? Are you mostly concerned with staying at the cutting edge of AI and machine learning because, you feel that's a competitive advantage? So part of your interest here today is to stay on the forefront in your industry. Is it to avoid some basic data security and governance problems that you think might pop up as you do more stuff with the data at your disposal? Or is there something that I haven't put on the list? And if that's the case, in addition to picking other, if you could do me a big favor and also submit your other in the form of a question, right? Use the Q&A tab to say, I checked a couple of boxes, but what you didn't have on the box is X, X being a concern that is important to you today that you're not seeing in my limited polling list. So again, if you could just check whichever one of those are most relevant to you, and make sure that you click the submit button. What we'll do is in real time, through the magic of the internet, we will share the results. And there they are. Okay, it looks like business relevance came in first place. And interestingly enough, taking time and cost out of your processes is trailing the pack. Beverly, I am really curious, is this at all what you were expecting to see? Do you think our group has self-selected in some way? What's your gut reaction to seeing these poll results?
Well, I will say that the delivering insights relevant to the business, that makes sense as the number one. I'm a little surprised to see the highly accurate analytical results, but it depends on what group you're in, Lenny. If you're in pharmaceuticals and accuracy is of critical importance, I can see why that would be, maybe we've over-indexed on certain areas. So, yeah, I can understand why the relevance is still king, and I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. Again, it's interesting to me also to see maybe at this stage also a lot of the people who are with us are kind of doing pilot programs, so they may not be scaling to the point where they're worried about taking time and cost out so they can deliver more services to, more parts of the business with more data. So that also may be a commentary less on sort of the importance of something as it is where people are in the maturation process. And again, I see some of you have already submitted your others as questions. If any of you have neglected to do so, please do so now. But I don't want to do any more preambling, Dr. Light. I am looking forward to your presentation, so why don't you go ahead and get started.
Sure thing. One more comment, if we could go back just one slide for a hot second. I think it's interesting that over a third commented that they want to be on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So much so it really matches what I've been seeing in the market, which is certain companies, rather large ones, are developing departments that are specific or committees that are specific to the AI and machine learning function, which I find very interesting that there's a focus on technique above something like a business question. So it's that kind of push, and it's interesting to see it reflected here in this poll as well.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Really happy to be here. Really appreciate being able to share the floor with Peggy Tsai, and I'll get started, Lenny. So what I wanted to cover, based on our topic of machine learning and data discovery, there's a couple of things in particular. First, I'll define what is machine learning. What do we mean by that? Second, we'll talk about what is data discovery. And because we're talking about you can't analyze what you can't find, we're going to really dig into and unpack the process of data discovery and the data, just a journey as you're trying to develop good insights. And then most importantly to me, I wanted to cover some of the challenges. In my experience that we covered just a tad, I've done consulting, I've done practitioner work at multiple companies, and I've taught for about 15 years at different schools where I require course projects. So over the course, I've either personally executed, overseen around 200 or 300 projects in analytics in the past 25 years. So what happens is I start seeing these, patterns. You can almost model. Actually, you probably could. You can model the different types of challenges that you see when you're trying to develop more advanced types of analytics and methods for coming up with deeper insights. So that's why I want to focus on the challenges a little bit, but there's sort of a build to it. So machine learning. Yeah. What is machine learning? I asked this question recently when my grad research assistant, I have to give him credit because he did 90% of the work. My grad research assistant and I were curious about the perceptions of executives for machine learning. So I can tell you that even the executive levels have it down pretty close to what is machine learning. Machine learning is all about pattern recognition. The definition itself is a process of analyzing where you're allowing machines to take the patterns that you would do normally through human cognition and human processing and sort of, quote, learn from those patterns so that the computer ends up doing something that without being explicitly told. So if you think about it, for those of you who are parents, I'm still a parent, but I'm past this stage that I'm about to describe. But you say to your child, clean up your room. You don't have to say, that means pick up that piece of clothing, hang up those pants, go make your bed by pulling the sheet tight and then putting the blanket over it. So it's a process of providing direction, and there's a pattern recognition that happens that says, okay, when she says clean up her room, this is what is meant, and that's the type of path that it follows. Now, when you're dealing with analytics in particular, the way I describe this to my students, which it's hard for them to relate because they haven't been in this business for 25 years, but back in the day, when we were all coding by hand and uphill both ways and no shoes on, in the cold, of course, what we did was we would run a model. We would assess the diagnostics. We would kind of look back and go, oh, let me try it a different way. Maybe I modify my Y variable. Maybe I change the structure. Maybe I use a different technique. Maybe I add some different types of constraints, or I filter the data differently, something. And then you iterate, and that's a second iteration. And then you iterate again, and then you iterate again. Well, this can take a very long time, and it would require a very broad skill set to be able to use different techniques over and over and over again. So in the context of analytics, the machine learning process, in a sense, does this for you. So that's what we mean by machine learning in the analytics context, building and refining models. Now, what is meant by data discovery? Data discovery we define as a process by which business users make some kind of sense of vast amounts of information contained in different sources. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, high-performance computing type of vast amounts of information. It can be smaller data sets, but the point being that data discovery involves taking what is known as data assets, data elements, and I'm going to touch on that in just a second, and turning that into some sort of knowledge, some sort of information. Now, keep in mind that when we talk about data, we're not just talking about a bunch of structured numbers. So data could include video. It can include audio. It can include any kind of visual. So data is any sort of information piece, and the data discovery process involves making sense of that information piece, especially when you put them in combination. Just as a quick reminder, you can submit your questions as we're going through this, so don't feel that you need to wait until the end. Next, I'll talk about the process, moving from data to insights. Now, keep in mind that this is not a complete cradle-to-cradle type of process that I'm describing here. Based on our topic, I've limited the scope to go from data to insights. There's most likely going to be a business question, like a problem recognition, and then after the insights, there's going to be some feedback loop that goes back into redefining what the business problem is and what the questions are. But this is just a section of source of data down to the finding of insights. So the three big chunks that I want to walk through, the challenges for each of these three, are as follows. Number one, the source of data. So this is kind of where the data comes from, what it looks like. Second is making that data usable. So for someone who's new to this field, they think, oh, well, you have the data, it's going to be usable. No. People that have, more than a year or two of experience have already figured out the data can be extremely dirty, and typically you have to massage it and talk to it really sweet to get it to do what you want it to. And then the third step in the process is finding insights from that. So it's about extraction, cleaning, and finding some sort of insights. So I'll talk through some of the major challenges. And again, this is a very biased, very subjective, based on my 25 years and hundreds of projects, kind of perspective. So you may have faced different types of challenges. I'm just highlighting a few so that you don't have to wait 25 years and go through what I've gone through, but you can learn from some of what I've seen. Also of note is that there are many, many more challenges than what I'm putting forth. I'm merely giving you the top handful that I see as most prominent in some of these areas. So the source. Who, what, and where is the data? Who's got that data? And how do I get to it? So the nature of the data can be really tricky. The different types of data, which I'll talk about in just a second, there are different capture methods. There are different storage locations. And sometimes getting to your data can feel a bit like you're breaking into Fort Knox or breaking out of Fort Knox. So it's really tricky at times to figure out how I'm going to access this data. But the number one challenge that I see is the location. Oftentimes, raw data comes from different sources managed by different data stewards, and it requires not just skill, but actually tact. So you have to have the both cultural, maybe sometimes political, as well as technical expertise oftentimes to be able to access data before you can even start thinking about building models from it and getting insight. Because ultimately, that's where we're trying to go, is we're trying to get to some sort of meaning. But one of the biggest challenges that I see is that these data sources come from all these different areas, and you have to find ways to access them. A second huge challenge when it comes to the source itself is that data is often inconsistent. For those of you who are in the BI, business intelligence reporting world, I salute you. I've never been a member of that field exactly. I've been more on the modeling side, but I have so much respect for the reporting and BI professionals that I meet because you guys have to, consistency is the name of your game. So for example, I witnessed in a medical context where a report was pulled and one user pulled the report and said, okay, here's all the cancer patients from this location and here's what's going on with them. And then another user pulled what he thought was exactly the same thing, and they got two different numbers. But maybe one was not cancer but terminal, and the other was cancer. And so it's not just that, but it's also things like loyalty. So how one user or one consumer of the data might consider what is loyal is going to be different than how someone else might consider what is loyal. Oftentimes the types of data can vary because of the cleaning process even. So certain things get kicked out based on one protocol, and then in other places they wouldn't. So there's all these challenges when it comes to the raw data itself. But the two biggest ones I see are sourcing, just the location, getting access. And then the second one is about the data types. And we're dealing with lots of different apples and oranges on things that are supposed to be pretty much the same. Those are the top two. The second challenge area that I want to focus on based on our process map is about making it usable, and this is where you're dealing with data cleansing. And the data cleansing can be very, very time-consuming. I'd love to see some comments in the Q&A, especially, I would love to hear what % you think you're spending or your team is spending or your analytics group that you work with, what % do you think they're spending on the cleaning process? It's been estimated that around 70 to 80% is spent on getting and cleaning the data before you can start making any sense of it. So this is a very trying time. I will say that I don't regret having gone through much of the cleaning that I've gone through, mostly because it's also an incredible way to really learn about your data in the context, in the business question itself. So even though it can be really frustrating at times, and parts of it can be automated, it can also prove very rewarding and helping you understand the data, validate what you think is in there, and coming up with ways of cleaning and prepping it that are efficient. The biggest challenge with managing the data is, of course, the cleaning side of it. Even if data is perfect, quote unquote, perfectly collected, here's something we often overlook and we don't think about. Most data that we analyze is not collected for the purpose that we're analyzing. So, for example, if you're analyzing sales and you're trying to do that so you can figure out how am I going to advertise, how am I going to treat my customers, what products am I going to have available, you're trying to figure out how do I change the business, move the operations, adjust my advertising, what can I do differently to push sales, okay? So let's think about sales. Where does that number come from? Probably from transactions. Why was it collected? Most of the time, metrics like sales numbers are not collected so that you can go analyze them. They're collected so that you can keep account of what you've sold, maybe for inventory purposes or for accounting purposes and those sorts of things. So that's what sometimes can make data a little dirty even when it's perfect, because it's probably really great data for the purpose that it's being collected, but the odds are it's not actually being collected for you to go analyze it. It's just, that's a secondary thing. The third area is about finding insights. And of course, this is my favorite. Finding the source and cleaning the data that takes up all that time, to me, is just very janitorial, challenging, uphill sort of battle. But by the time you get this perfect, wonderful block of data that you can actually analyze, this is where different types of perspectives will come in. And what I mean by that is you got to really think about the business questions. And this will help. I noticed that on the poll, you guys mentioned the relevance being super important, okay? This is sometimes, again, hundreds of projects, but this is sometimes where I see a disconnect happening. It can be really frustrating when you look from the outside and you see it happening internally. You just want to help people. But that disconnect sometimes is that the quant or the analytics professional or the analytics function or team, they're looking at the data and they have certain wants oftentimes. If you have a really good quant, they're going to be curious. And so they might say, I wonder what will happen if I model this, okay? Well, the challenge is they need to focus really on what the business questions are. And so that's got to do with an immersion into the business and understanding what kind of answers are we trying to get to. Oftentimes that's overlooked. So the business questions, that's got to be a focus. That's got to be in the forefront of the vision during the whole process of extracting insights. The second part is the usability. The usability means that it's great if you come up with this incredible model and it's very telling, but if you can never use it, or if things are out of reach, or if you're suggesting modifications that will never happen or can never happen, that makes it very challenging. Again, this ties into that relevance, which is number 3. It's got to make sense for the business question. It's got to be usable. and hopefully you pull these together to develop some insights that are actually relevant. This is going to increase the chances of analytics results getting used. In summary, in today's world, business decisions should be data-inspired. Notice I don't use the term data-driven. Oftentimes the term data-driven will imply that, this is my perspective obviously because I know lots of people that use that term, but data-driven often implies that you're removing intuition altogether and you're purely going on science. But the more successful scenarios that I've witnessed, and I'm interested to hear other perspectives if you guys want to comment in the Q&A, have been where the decision makers are still, making decisions, but they're doing so with the presence and the acceptance and the immersion into and the absorption of insights that have been derived from data. Garbage in, garbage out, always going to be a thing. So as we're talking about you can't analyze what you can't find, you want to get to that, you want to be able to get to advanced modeling, you want to be able to get to being able to answer your business questions and deriving those insights that are relevant, that are meaningful, that are usable, and that really focus on your business questions. It's all great, but you've got to remember that garbage in is always going to be garbage out. And being data savvy can often translate into business benefits, including better revenues and reduced operating costs, market advantages, consumer loyalty, and other factors. It's interesting to see different types of business questions that are being answered today. So people analytics, HR analytics, analytics to help people understand how do I change my operations and hiring to reduce safety incidents. And it's encouraging to see different kinds of benefits come from it. I will now turn over the control to Peggy Tsai, who will walk us through her part of the presentation. Peggy?
Thank you, Beverly. Hello, everyone. Beverly, if I could move the slide over. So just as Lenny said, a little bit about myself. I have over 15 years of experience in enterprise data management, and in the last year, I've actually transitioned into an analytics and data function here at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. So my comments that I'm about to make is about the history that I've been in terms of working with data management, governance, and stewardship. So just to level set, depending on everyone's experience level here, just want to talk about the data governance life cycle. And this is a process that I've seen, a fundamental process that I've seen that's been implemented in many different organizations. And it's really an iterative process of people and the way that we organize the data. The first step here is about scope. And depending on the project, whether it's regulatory or a report, there are data stewards preferably sitting in the business that would help identify the scope of the data being governed. The second step here is around definition. Normally we ask data stewards to put business definitions in the glossary and also put around the metadata around describing the definition. And usually there's a good classification about how this data is being organized. The next step is around measuring. How do we measure the critical data elements and whether or not it's something that's at a desired state? Usually we have the business and the data stewards provide those types of metrics in terms of data quality rules. Now, the fourth aspect here, and again, I haven't seen this in all types of organizations, but just looking at the critical data elements and determining what the risk assessment is in the organization, whether it's an operational, regulatory, or it's a client-facing risk, if you don't govern that data element well. And last but not least, and most common, is actually how do we monitor and continually monitor the critical data elements in scope. And if you see the arrows here, it's iterative because as the scope grows, most organizations continue to enlarge the data governance of its data assets. And so as I've been in data governance for more than 15 years, I've seen really two types of data governance frameworks that's being built. But what I observe now is not really that regulatory and compliance is not really the business driver of data governance programs and how it's being implemented. But before I go there, let me just explain a little bit about what I consider an enterprise data governance framework. And this is really a traditional top-down approach to managing an enterprise data glossary, which usually is an agnostic view of how business terms are being defined. Usually there is also a taxonomy of how the data assets across the enterprise are being documented and linked together. There are roles in a data governance council that help provide the policies and the standards on how the organization should be understanding and implementing its data. Another role I mentioned before in the previous slide is around data stewards who can work alongside the business or can be entrenched in the business to make sure that data standards are being adhered to. And normally in an enterprise type of data governance program, the scope is wide and really overarching across multiple departments. And I've seen HR or legal compliance normally be the first ones to implement this type of enterprise framework, and it would expand to other departments. As regulatory concerns are being put in place, another type of data governance framework is really around what I consider more of an operational model. And those can focus, for example, around BCBS 239, where the requirements are around documenting the data lineage. So in that type of regulation, we, in addition to the other metadata that we collect, it's around having controls and control owners really documenting and testing to those type of processes. Another one I want to note here is GDPR, which stands for General Data Protection Regulation. And that's a project I worked on extensively last year, and it's really about understanding how data activities across the organization is being documented and how it links to customer information. So for that type of regulation, again, it's more process and operational oriented, and that also needs to be documented and governed in a regulatory way. So as those types of two types of frameworks, data governance, analytics is really, I think, is now the more forefront that's really driving what I call the data evolution, or the next phase of data governance. Here you can see the two types of roles that I mentioned. The first one is the traditional, what I call data steward. And if you are a data steward for the account data domain, for example, we're expecting that data steward to be defining a business term, for example, like customer name, address, or email. The data steward would provide data quality rules and thresholds for acceptance. It would work with application or technology owners to understand requirements for how the business uses its data. So that's the type of who and what the role of a data steward is. And now with analytics now being more in the forefront, you have a data scientist or a data modeler. And this type of person is more concerned with large data sets, so not specifically individual business terms, but collectively as a whole, where can I find and join large data sets together? And their purpose may be to create models, for example, to predict customer behavior or patterns. And the reason why they're creating these models is really to answer questions quickly, and they usually have some type of specific hypothesis that they're looking to investigate. And they're supporting other departments like sales and marketing campaigns. And again, as I said earlier, the what is really different for the two roles of data stewards and data scientists, business terms and data qualities on a more discrete level for the data steward, whereas the data scientist is looking at more on the data data set as a whole, and they assume that the quality of the data is actually there. I mean, we all know that they spend most of their time cleansing data, but that's another point I'll make later on in the slide. Really about why analytics is driving this data evolution. It's because, I mean, previously regulations and compliance programs have built in place in companies large data organizations. And now there's a value to all this curated data, all this great cleansed data that many organizations hopefully have in place. And there's a reason to now take advantage of that data. And analytics as well can also really drive improve data quality as a whole, continually drive and improve that, and also help improve customer service, for example, across the organizations. And an example for that is in a lot of the retail companies. So just want to do a quick case study on FreshDirect. For those of you who live in the northeast of the United States, you are familiar with FreshDirect, which is an online grocer. It's a food company, it's a transportation company, and I would also classify it obviously as an online realtor. And actually had the opportunity to hear the CEO of FreshDirect, Jason Ackerman, speak about his company, and it's really fascinating on the surface level. You just think about how they deliver food and how I go onto the website and deliver the food, but really they are tracking every single click that I'm doing on their website. They understand my behaviors, what I'm looking at, what I'm browsing at. So all those algorithms underneath the FreshDirect website, I mean, they're being worked on by their data scientists, and they have lots of advanced analytical people working on their team. But FreshDirect is unique in a way where it uses analytics in a very impactful way. I mean, they want to take advantage of the data that they're collecting from the customers. So one example is about on-time delivery. So the company monitors the delivery rate of every truck and enters that into their BI SAP system. So every hour it can use the previous hour's data to predict how many deliveries will be on time. So it's sort of like predictive analytics in terms of the truck deliveries. And if the on-time delivery rate is below their target, they have to figure out how many trucks they want to be able to help compensate for that. And using this type of analysis, FreshDirect was able to improve its on-time delivery rate from 91% to 99%. And obviously, 99% keeps many more of its customers happy. And FreshDirect actually gives customer rebates if their deliveries are late and on time. So it's really a great example of how FreshDirect actively uses analytics to help make their customers happy. They also use it to help improve their fulfillment process. They take customer complaints very seriously in terms of packaging, and they use analytics as well to help improve that type of delivery. So really the premise here is many companies use analytics, but it's my opinion here that no organization can really be successful and succeed in analytics without a strong foundation in data governance. And a lot of the components that I spoke about earlier, but to reiterate, many people on phone call they've seen a data governance presentation. They always talk about people, process, technology, platform, and it's essentially the same when we talk about IT governance. These are the same three major principles that's always opined on. But what's really different here about analytics governance, that's what I want to make note here for everybody. So starting with people, again, instead of the traditional roles of data stewards and having business stakeholders, now we have data scientists, data modelers, and these are the folks that are really entrenched in the data. They know the end-to-end lineage of the data. They're constantly analyzing it. And I actually sit with a team of data scientists here in wealth management, and they know all the mappings, transformations. They're like the super data geeks here when it comes to the data. And that's actually quite different sometimes when you talk to data stewards who may be in the business and they know the data, but they might not know the full impact that their data has across the organization. Secondly is around the process, and the process used to govern the data seems similar to in analytics governance. I mean, we're talking about how do we govern and standardize, for example, business terms. And the only difference here, I would say, with analytics is that we're talking about models and algorithms, and we want to make sure that those are being governed, and there's a process around making sure that's compliant and up to date as well. Interestingly, there may be new policies that need to be written. For example, when data scientists are joining together separate data sets together, they may find something separate that may not violate any PAI rules, but together, joined as a set, may be an issue. And for example, if you have a list of account numbers and a separate list of Social Security numbers or government ID numbers separately, it has no impact, but together, joined, obviously, it has a greater impact. And the third item here is around technology or the platform that's being used. And analytics data governance really should leverage new tools that catalog the data and be able to find unstructured data and link it to a lot of the structured data sets that are already in-house. So a lot of unstructured data around marketing and sales, social media, for example, to understand customer behavior. That's something we want to be able to join together. Another point I'd like to make about technology is the concept around crowdsourcing. And I think that's really prevalent around a team of data scientists because they're constantly learning from each other and they're constantly asking questions. And if there's not a technology platform where they can really share this information and come up with the best practices, that's really important. So I would say something that a technology that supports this tool, the crowdsourcing concept is really important. So because this topic is around machine learning for data discovery, I felt like I had to put a slide here really about what's underlying machine learning. And Beverly already made lots of great points about the qualities of the data, but just wanted to make a few more notes here. And it's really about the structure of the data, the framework of the data, which is foundation to any data governance. It's still needed, regardless of how quickly analysts and data scientists need the data. There may be additional data quality controls that exist when it comes to doing advanced analytics. And the people component, the person component, still needs to be there in order to query and make sure that the data is accurate. A couple more slides I have here is just about key differentiators in analytical governance. And the biggest box I have here is just around self-service analytics. And again, this concept is not new. It's about really allowing data scientists to quickly build their data models and data sets independently outside of technology. And it's really to avoid all the time they spend data cleansing, understanding the data, what filters should I be using to query the data, and just ensuring that the data quality is there. And because they work so quickly to build their models and to really on a real time be able to come up with results, there still needs to be a basic understanding of what the data is about and designing a good data model. That just cannot be avoided. Two quick things here about visualization. Really in the past, I think the traditional data steward or data governance role would want to see data lineage and be able to interact with the data, and there's certainly lots of tools for Tableau, for example, that the business can use to ask what-if scenarios. And because the business is still involved in understanding the data, this is still a key component for analytical governance. And as I said earlier, usability. Usability of any tool is quite important. I've seen tons of data governance tools built around technology, and their focus obviously is different. They're looking specifically at physical lineage, and again, that's not something a data steward would want to see. They want to see a high-level conceptual layer, and where a lot of these tools are going to the physical level. But the interesting about analytical governance is that they need a hybrid of both. They want to see high level and be able to drill down to understand the transformation rules and mapping rules. They need to be able to flex from a very general to a very deep level. And again, really the goal here of analytics, predictive analytics at least, is to be able to join unstructured data to structured data together. And there are plenty of vendors out there that can help with using machine learning to really link and train different data sets together. But the fundamentals of data governance, without the proper structure and taxonomy and the people around in place, what analytics does is won't be a very scalable solution. And last point here, I know that our time is wrapping up. We want to keep enough time for a Q&A, is that at the end of the day, data governance is leveraging the best practices of the people that know the data the best. So without proper data management, people, and processes, analytics can only predict to a certain level of confidence. So as Beverly said earlier, garbage in, garbage out. We want to make sure that the results of analytics are confident and people can trust it. So analytics is only as good as the data itself. So with proper care, really we can inspire data to be the most powerful part of any organization. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it over back to Lenny.
Lenny, are you on the line, sir?
Yes, I am here. I am looking through all these questions. We have a great set of questions. It looks like a lot of people use the Q&A tab to take strong issue with Beverly's assertion that one can tell their child to clean their room, and the child will immediately intuit that there's an aggregated set of tasks which fit that definition, as opposed to requiring repeated instruction to, in fact, pull the sheet over the bed, put the clothes in the hamper, and the toys in their toy chest. So I think we need a separate webinar, the application of machine learning to child discipline. But we'll take that up later. Beverly, let me start off asking you a question, which it may not be the most important one, but I think for you and I, it kind of provoked the most discussion offline. We've talked about everything we can do to get the right data, apply the right methods and models to it, but the fact is decision makers sometimes still don't like the data they see because they have their own sense of what the world looks like. Do you want to comment at all on the futility of this entire enterprise because decision makers won't believe you anyway?
You mean the fact that I'm just going to take your reality and replace it with my own?
Yeah.
Yes, it is a challenge, and I'm not going to sugarcoat the steep of this challenge in that no matter what you do, no matter what kind of data you can provide, there are situations, and I've witnessed plenty, when you get this great result and you have these incredible insights and you can prove, at least from a modeler's perspective, a mathematical proof of how you can help the business, but the results are rejected. So that is not an easy process. Some of the changes that I've seen companies make that have proven successful for just inching toward a more data-enabled culture include things like, unfortunately, waiting for the next gen to take up leadership roles. And what I mean by that is, there are other ways I'm going to talk about in just a second, but one of them being that, the kids that are coming out of, say, Georgia Tech and other schools, they're born with data. Data is just a thing. It's just part of their lives. And so they are inherently more data accepting. And they tend to be a little bit more, just not only accepting, but they look for it. They seek it. So sometimes companies will wait until they start seeing that kind of talent rise to the higher rank. Other types of things that can be done is you can establish, even as one relatively small-ish person within a company, you can establish a set of network champions. So I was at a company with different divisions, and I saw the same kind of business problems come up, the same types of analytics techniques, and nobody was talking. So why not get these guys to sort of, talk to each other, whether that's through a brown bag sessions, through some kind of electronic means, through meetup groups, through a summit, maybe a company-wide summit, like one I put together a couple times for different companies, just to get people talking. And then the third quick recommendation, and there are more, but this is just the top couple, is get some small wins. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't go for the nuclear weapon. Go for the tiny little missile, and just show the value of data. And over time, I know it can be a bit painful as an analytics professional, but over time, as the benefits are starting to get more realized, the culture tends to come around.
Yep, and we may talk about culture actually in a minute, but Peggy, you kind of raised this issue of bringing together diverse stakeholders with sort of a data governance council. Do you see those kinds of conversations as being useful, again, not only for the immediate purpose of getting the input and collaboration from data science and the business and legal and so on, but do you also see that as starting the kind of conversation that Beverly's talking about in terms of building a stronger data culture generally? Like, we need to sit and all talk about this, and in addition to tackling a data governance issue, it leads us to think about the role data plays in our business? Certainly.
Absolutely. I think, without having all different types of stakeholders, and at this point, I attribute every business stakeholder to be a data stakeholder.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because no company can run a business without good data. So the more people that we can incorporate, I say data council because that's really what a traditional group of folks who would sit around physically in a table and help prioritize their data requirements, but all different types of roles and levels should be involved in understanding their data. And something that Beverly said earlier around boiling the ocean, I've seen that multiple times in many organizations where the focus of all the business use cases is literally, it's gigantic. Being hyper-focused on the specific business use case that can be answered and being able to deliver that really well can help start and drive the data culture in the organization. I think that's super important.
Yeah, there was another question here I thought that was interesting, Beverly, that I wanted to direct your way, which is how do we stay away from that problem of I'm going to look for my keys under the light because the light is better there, that the availability of data inherently makes us look for answers where the data that's easily accessible is, right?
Right. Yeah, and sometimes on the I can tell that question was probably asked by someone who's on the business side. We have a similar type of issue from the analytics side, but data scientists you put a hammer in their hand and everything all of a sudden looks like a nail, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, it can be tricky to understand what I call the why. I talk to my students about that. There's the why you want to get the answers, what you're going to do with the information, and then there's the why, which is the real reason why. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through an entire project analysis, get to the end, think I'm answering a business question, only to find out that there was some other reason for the question to begin with. It was never revealed for a number of different reasons. So some of that is just a matter of analytics maturity and being able to go through this process a couple times, a couple hundred times, so that there's a better understanding. I think most of the time it's not a deliberate misunderstanding of the real reasons. So that's probably, some of the let's look under the lamppost for our keys because that's where I'm more comfortable. Most of the time it's probably just a lack of attention and time that's spent understanding the real business question to begin with.
Yeah, my keys, when I look for them, are always already in my pocket, which is how I tend to waste a lot of my time. Hey, we're near the top of the hour. I want to give you each a chance to wrap up and say any final words. So, Peggy, why don't you go first? Is there anything at all in closing you want to either reiterate or a question you want to answer or anything you want to share? You got about 45 seconds.
Sure. So I see one of the questions here is about driving engagement for a data governance program. And a lot of what I talked about building the foundations for a data governance program, it is hard work. It is dirty. It does take a lot of effort. But really being able to understand the data, the business value question that needs to be answered and being hyper-focused on that, I think is really critical. And I think that's going to be where the value is added. Instead of spending all this effort on, a lot of different little things, it should be hyper-focused on one particular question. I think that's going to be able to really show demonstrable results. I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm also on Twitter at Peggy Sai, so that's where I can be reached as well.
Great, Peggy. Beverly, anything you want to say to wrap up? You got a minute.
Yep, just one quick comment. Of all the technical things, of all the all the different things I could make a suggestion for the audience to do. The one thing I would tell you is just be an advocate. Just become a data advocate. You'll see lots of things shift once you start becoming that voice. So get into it in a sense, and don't be afraid to pull others with you. So try to be that advocate to progress. I love where we are as a vertical and as a field, as a very immature yet very blossoming and dynamic field of data science, where we've gone from a complete misunderstanding to almost a reliance on data science and analytics professionals for decision making. I love seeing that kind of progress. So just don't be afraid to put that advocacy hat on. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Beverly Wright, PhD, CAP, and there's also a podcast that my company runs for Georgia Tech called The Analytics Buzz. So feel free to check that out.
Great. And for everybody who's on, if we didn't get to your question, don't worry. We have it in the queue. So we'll get to it offline just because we didn't do it in real time. That's fine. You will get an email with today's slides. You'll also get a link to today's presentation on demand, so if you want to share it with a peer, people who report to you, people who you report to, that's fine. Also, if you found your time with us today worthwhile, please keep your eyes peeled for future events. I'm also available, Lenny Liebman, on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And I just want to thank Beverly and Peggy again for taking time out to share with us. Again, let's continue the conversation afterwards. We are at a really special place in our industry right now, and I think we all have a lot to learn from each other. So have a productive day, and hope to see you online again soon.
Thank you, Lenny. Thanks, Peggy.